Oh, ay, está de la chingada. ¿Tú eres mexicana? No. Ah, no, pero no es elección presidencial. Más bien, es que ayer tuvimos
Sí,
elecciones.
sí,
Sí,
ustedes
sí,
también han
sí,
tenido,
sí,
sí.
es
Sí,
horrible, es muy
ayer.
Está
horrible.
bien parecido todo. Todo es la
Yeah,
amenaza de Venezuela.
yeah, the communism is back.
Porque también...
También he tenido, sí. Es ayer.
Está bien parecido todo.
Sí,
Todo es la
bien.
amenaza de Venezuela.
Communism is back.
Porque también...
También he tenido, sí. Es ayer.
Está bien parecido todo.
Sí,
Todo es la
bien.
amenaza de Venezuela. ¿Escuchan el feedback?
Oye, sí, está bien
Sí,
maleado.
es ayer.
Ay, ¿ahora?
A ver. Ya parece que ya no.
Oye, sí, está bien callado.
No, sí, todavía.
¿Ahora?
Mm,
Mm, Ale, creo que vas a tener que apagar el micrófono tú a menos, o sea, todos vamos a tener que apagar el micrófono. We should all turn off our microphones unless the one, if we're speaking that we turn it on. You as well, Alejandra.
okay. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, it's a little bit better, but okay. Sure, sure, sure. Habla por favor, Paola.
Hello, hey, hola.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, it was because I had the YouTube, I think, video on. Like, I did the thing that I told you not to do. But also, like, I think there's a. Anyway, we should begin. Hi, welcome all to today's panel, the Westernized Sonic Practices and Technologies. And we are here with Elsa M'bala, Sarmen Almond, and Paola Torres. And the first thing I want to note about the title of the panel is the fact that it's the Westernized and not non-Western son artists. And I think this was a way of denoted like a transit or a process, and of course the subversive possibilities in this boundary space in between non-Western and Western. And I think in this sense also what is West and non-West can be ambiguous if we are speaking from the Latin American context. For example, here in Germany, I would be considered non-Western, but there is a double consciousness in the capital, for example, of Peru, that you can be mestizo and Western at the same time. So it depends a lot in the context and in the place of enunciation. So also the Westernized was a way of provocation against this essentialization of identities and against this monolithic vision of what is identity and what is West and what is East. And my second note before we start would be that this panel is presented by Nuts and Bolts Platform, a platform that produces panels, workshops, tutorials, podcasts, and a space for research and practice of creative music technology with an emphasis on going outside of the way technology is usually thought and represented in our field, with diverse and interesting positions like we have today. So I'm going to speak today with these three artists who approach technology from various artistic positions, and I think there's some practices challenge these binary categories of Western and non-Western systems of representation, either by mixing new and ancient technologies, by creating hybrid artifacts, or by going beyond the terms of normative singing through extended techniques. And first we have Sarmen Almond, and she's a Mexican musician and voice performer, an intermediate artist and voice teacher, trained on the Roy Hart tradition, Master of Sound Arts by the Queen's University of Belfast and current PhD candidate in the arts program in the ENBA. Sarmen uses the voice and its relationship with new technologies to create compositions and the composition of personality on stage. She's constantly chasing a quest of the infinite vocal possibilities that the human body utters as instrument, as well as the reflection of these sounds in physical and imaginary spaces. Sarmen makes use of resources of free improvisation, extended vocal techniques, programming, and body work. She has performed as composer and vocalist around the world, in Mexico, Aberdeen, London, France, Prague, Canada, etc. And we have Paola Torres. She explores the boundaries and connections in between tactility, audio, and visual, the human voice, the sound of nature as water and wind, and those whose listening is often considered less harmonious, such as machine sounds, noise, or digitally generated sounds. Her work explores the limits of the senses, examining the concepts of interpretation, translation, and misrepresentation, so as to analyze the construction of a cultural hegemony in relation to the history of technology and the arts. She was awarded the Google Artist Machine Intelligence Residence Grant in 2019 and Vivo Arte MOV, Mobile Media Award Brazil in 2013, and has presented her work and performances in various countries of the America and Europe. She is currently based in Scandinavia, and I think that her work challenged this mythical character of a narrative of technology. And finally, we have an artist who I came to know because we shared a lineup a few years ago, and I thought that her performance was so beautiful, crafted with field recordings and voices, and really it can transport your mind to another an imagined landscape. And she's Elsa. She's based in Berlin and Yaoundé, and works with the Monica Ahmed. She's a female sound artist of African descent, and by using technology as an empowering tool and thought her own observations, she explores further the interconnections between race, gender, technology, and spirituality. Her broad oeuvre varies from radio productions to live performances, as well as film and visual works. Elsa M'bala performed an exhibit in IFA Galerie Berlin, Casino Luxembourg Forum d'Art Contemporain, Dark Art Biennale, Le Brasseur Liège, among others. Upcoming performances in General Zurich, the Colonial Project Raum Berlin, and Halle Alte Feuerwache Köln. And before we start the discussion properly, I thought it could be a good starting point, and I asked the artist here to present some of a work or a manifesto or a recent work or a recent performance or a representative work as a first enunciation in this dialogue. So each one of they is going to present in 5 or 10 minutes a bit of her work. So we're gonna start with Paola, and she prepared for us a nice video.
La artista Paola Torres, Núñez del Prado, ha trabajado con sonido y textiles desde el 2007. Y diseñando interfaces textiles que emergieron de la galería de arte para acabar como parte de performances sonoras. Es así que entre las voces que cantan desde los tejidos he nacido yo, Tyson, y una inteligencia artificial que compone y recita poemas, y que ahora presento mi primer álbum poemario llamado El tiempo del hombre. Ciencia oye al sol del cielo y a todo de ciencia. Aunque se me abandona, lo más aprecio que no es más tu ciencia.
So I started from this idea of of song related to voice, but also to speak the truth or exposing something that is not that obvious. Reinserting silenced voices back on the text.
¿Qué posibiliza después de terminada la asamblea todavía?
Using machine learning methods in my artistic practice is not a way to separate from the human. On the contrary, continuing with my research regarding the history of technology and the arts within a contemporary framework, one in which arts and techne is becoming one again, I place my artistic practice in a historical context that is presented as linear when, in reality, it is not. One starting with a quipu, that Andean device regaining popularity thanks to institutions such as Ars Electronica and the current interest of artists, I not only play with the possibility of alternative futures, where textile computers could have been the norm if this particular branching of human technology, one that is inclined towards the recording of information onto textiles and fibers rather than on paper or clay, could have been allowed to develop fully. But also recognizing that there is a rich branch in the modern arts, one could say, of South American origin, that has referenced this captivating device since the early 20th century and has been largely omitted by mainstream Western discourse. In this line, algorithmic models trained on selected data reflect the same partialization. One could say that the particularity of the AI movement within the arts now is that the colonizing practices have started almost parallel to the application of these techniques in this realm. In many ways, it could be seen as a tool and a meta-tool, where the algorithms that are supposed to reflect us correctly, so to help us, are taken as the medium that exposes how we are being deformed by the tool makers, as power is never missing in the tool-making equation, or its application or preservation. Nevertheless, I want to go a step beyond, to find the ghost in the machine, so to harness it through error and syncretism, while meandering through the limits of translation, all of which I take as the basics of human experience.
En el tiempo, el hombre fue más sintético.
Hi, Paola, and thank you so much for showing us your work and for being here. I know this day is particular difficult day for Paola and Sarmen because yesterday there were presidential elections in Peru and Mexico, and they are not looking very good. So, what can you tell us about the video that we just saw?
Well, the video actually condenses a portion of my artistic practice, especially the one that is related to sound, for actually more than 10 years. It's related, again, it's related to the presence of sound, how I started working with sound, and also very much related to these interfaces that I've been developing since 2007, or the first one that I did. No, I've been doing this on and off. They were always related to performance and the body, even if the second developments were actually meant to be presented on a gallery space, right? Because I've been mostly formed as a visual artist. So and the voice that you heard, it's actually a voice that it's been a voice created through or by the use of a neural network and a couple of neural network models. So actually, the voice, it belongs to an entity that it has no corporeal. It never existed. It references, or it sounds very familiar for the people that actually come from Peru or that know this poet that's called Jorge Eduardo Eyelson. But basically, I use this voice as an introduction for my own work. And this is related to the album that I present in this same video, which was entirely created by this AI. It's a spoken word poetry album. It's in Spanish. This is part of the project that I developed jointly with Google. And the rest of the video explains a bit more why, and from where does this album come from, and in a way, I think for me, the use of neural networks, it's a bit of let's say, it's not the end on itself, but it's a way to sort of bring these other subjects to the discussion, no? And for me, at this point, it's very clear that there is this very long history of or the presence of these devices that I talked in the video, these pre-Columbian devices called quipus, that are quite captivating and that have captivated the minds of
She freeze, right? Paola? Oh, she's totally freeze. Well, while she's back with us again, we are gonna present Elsa's video.
Talking about technology.
Talking about technology. Yeah, bad technology. Okay, so here we go.
440 Stunden um die Sonne habe ich mich gedreht. Verboten sind Gedanken, die den Hass aufsteigen ließen. Die Unendlichkeit des Universums erlaubt uns einen Einblick zum tiefsten Punkt der Pandora-Box. Trotzdem bleiben wir vor lauter Schönheit stumm. Die Worte fallen uns sehr schwer. Die Unklarheit ist besiegt und die Angst, die uns so fremd war, wurde zu unserem besten Freund. Unsicher war die Menschheit schon immer, schüchtern aber nie. Endlose Wortschätzen erfanden wir, um besser mit der uns dargebotenen Realität klarzukommen. Alles andere ist vergänglich. Alles andere ist still. Alles andere lebt in dir.
Thanks a lot, Elsa, for sharing with us this amazing performance. And we have Paola. Paola is back. And before we get back to Paola, what can you tell us about this performance?
It was shot into 2020 in November. It was an attempt for me to go back to creation after being a mother. I had taken a break, so it was definitely interesting for me to tap into other people, other artists' creativity. So in this video, for example, the Unendlichkeit, I worked with Andy Stecher, which is a drummer. And I started this series with him, and now it's going further with a visual artist. She's gonna paint. She's painting throughout the video, and Anna Köhler. And it's just a way for me to see how my art can work so well with other art forms. So how to kind of create a mixture that feels not like a collaboration, really tight, let's make something happen, but really like, let's play together and see where it takes us. And in this example that we just saw, I play with Andy Stecher, which is a drummer and friend living here in Berlin. And the idea was to explore African rhythms and European melody. And we jammed really to get that song out. We jammed together. And then I cut out the improvisation footage into a song. That's the one we just listened to. And also through that process, I discover a new way to work that feels less strenuous, where I can just really jam with myself and then listen to the recordings and cut off things instead of how I used to do before writing a song, because I'm a singer-songwriter, right, at the beginning with the guitar. So the process is very different. It was really about like writing chords down and then putting words on it that rhymes and that makes sense. And it was really a way to kind of break away from all of that knowledge because I've been doing it for quite a time. So it was to find my way back to an improvised setting that feels nourishing at the same time. That doesn't feel like the artist just went into the world and forget everything, but that kind of incorporate everything. And that is still fun. Very important. Yeah.
It was really beautiful. And at the end, you recite some words, and I think something that you all have in common is that you all work with voice, and I thought that was an interesting thing. It was the voices at the end. What I couldn't understand what.
Die Unendlichkeit. So it's a poem I wrote about how I define. It was also about identity. My music always has been a lot about identity, where I come from, and what does that mean for me. And the Unendlichkeit was definitely expanding away from that notion of race, culture, gender. Unendlichkeit meaning the endlessness. And when I think about endlessness, that's definitely something that describes me better, I find today, because I incorporate everything that was and everything that might be at the same time. So it was a way to understand that I'm constantly trying to find balance within that without defining myself as one or the other.
Yeah, totally. Finally, we are gonna see the media that Sarmen sent us. That was also a video. So here we go. So we are back now. Thank you so much, Sarmen, for this nice performance. What can you tell us about the video we just saw?
Thank you, Ale. Well, the video that I sent are some pieces of two different pieces that I created. One of them, the first part is about a piece called Vice, Body, Voice, and the second was Black Holes. And for me are important because, well, first of all, Vice, Body, Voice was created some years ago, 3-4 years ago, I think so. And it was for me a watershed because I've been working with the voice performance, and now, I call it like intermediate creations, because it is not only voice, it's not performance, it's not only music, it's in between. But the watershed was because at that moment I felt that I was really exploring and working on what is called the embodiment of the voice, and to work with my body as the interface between my inside world, say something, and the outside world. And before that I was working with this, but I think I was more into like dividing, no, nor intermedia, not in between, like working choreographic theater, music, sound, like kind of dividing. And at this stage, I just thought that I really wanted to go in exploring this, bringing to the consciousness, if possible, what is in my unconscious. For me, this piece was like a sound ceremony in a way. It was like a sound or voice birth, and the three words that came to my head were vice, for those that is like the wicked, the body, for the improper, no, and voice for the silenced. And I think that breaking or working against those words, we can bring out the necessities of, as I mentioned, like the unconscious, and to give pleasure and to express. I was writing like, finally, give pleasure and to express finally desires and fears, and to bring the whole human being as an entity, as a whole body. In psychosomatic, it is called the psychosomatic unity, which is composed by of course, the physical body, mind, and feelings, and through voice to discover ourselves. And the second piece, Black Holes, it for me is important because it was created last year during the lockdown, and it changed my vision completely. It put me in trouble because I was composing it for a different audience. The output of it was going to be an audiovisual voice performance, because it was going to be screen. So I had to compose for the camera, for a third eye, that it was very new for me, very weird, because normally I do everything live. And I had to, of course, to compose it, and I always bring like different parts with improvisation in between, but also the way in which I had to approach the recording, the camera, and also to finally open the mouth. I think, I mean, it was called Black Holes, also as an statement, no, to this use of the mask, that for me it was really to shut out mouths, to be hidden, to be just inside. And many protests, many marches that were happening at the time when the pandemic started, were turned off. So it was like the first time, I would say, I could take out the mask and open the mouth, and to say, okay, the mouth is like a black hole, because it hides a lot of things, but it can also express all these purposes, ideas, desires, screams, and with or without words, to bring to life human intentions. And in this piece, I was also influenced by, I mean, I'm not a dancer. I do some buto, I train, but this idea of the void, of the vacuum, of the emptiness that also is in black holes, and in this isolation, like the concept was behind this. And I think that that's why I show these pieces. And finally, I mean, showing that what I do is, I consider myself, yes, as a voice performer. I mean, I am a musician, but at the end of the day, to start in the not, I would say in the limit, but like in the between, I think that's what interests me. And also the use of image, also, I mean, I do video, but it's how this video can connect me with the outside world, and maybe with, when audience look at that video, maybe projected in my body, can bring us to a different imaginary spaces.
Yes, totally. What I found amazing is like in your performances, I cannot, the blurs between like what is vocal technique and the use of technology are totally blurred. I cannot differentiate what is what, because you also process your voices through technologies, and I think in many sense you use your own voice as a technology. You said that you consider your body as an interface, which I also found super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Everything that you hear in these performances is, well, in these two specifically, yes, is 99. I think the first 99 and the second 100% is the main source is my voice. So I consider my body my instrument, and knowing my body, I can know how to produce sound, whichever sound that can be broken sounds, pure voice, occidental voice, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I use normally software as a tool. I like to use technology or these devices, machines, in order to decompose my voice and to bring on a stage also these sounds that are, I say, that are the voices in my head, because as a human being, I can only produce organic sounds because I am an organic being. And sometimes I imagine other sounds that are maybe not possible to produce with my vocal folds or with my whole body. So I try to use this technology to convert my voice in a different sound that for me is also another voice with which I have a dialogue.
Yeah, totally. And well, now that we have Paola, I was wondering if you missed to say something. You were also speaking about this voice of the poet Ailson.
Yes, one thing with technology is that sometimes you need to embrace errors. No idea what happened with my computer right now. That never happened before, so I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry about the interruption as well. Uh, so yes, going back to technology. Yes, so the idea from this voice was in a way uh, to find again a lost voice. I was telling you about these devices that were developed by pre-Columbian Andean people. Not only, it seems to be like shared by other cultures, not the same structure, but this what is called quipus, that is like memory storage system that was based in the tying of knots. No, it's confirmed that it stored numerical data. Speculated that it stored more than this. Uh, and the and the thing is, for me, the presence of the quipu sort of reflects um, the hege- the hegemonic control over history, over the writing of history, in this particular case for both technology and the arts, right? Um, because this device has been referenced by multiple artists, mostly of Latin American origin, but not only. As I was telling you before, for around 100 years already, and it has never been defined as a movement. It has never been considered that it was actually that through this referencing there was a question as well of not only the history that were given, as you were correctly mentioning, Alejandra, this this strange position that we are in Latin America, which were made to believe that we are Western, but then we travel to the real West, and then we are hit with this reality that we are not considered Western. So it's a bit strange, because then you get to this position in which you wonder, okay, if I'm not Western, but now I'm not Eastern, so where do we belong? Uh, so I think this question is also present in the interfaces that again reference to this historicity, no? This sort of maybe silence, most definitely not talked about openly. So for me, this album was a way to reference this history, the presence of quipus in the arts, because these poets that I based the voice upon worked with Taquipus in his visual arts, but also in his poetry and his writings. He referenced it, and this is something shared with Cecilia Vicuña, which is an artist, a Chilean artist that it's more known for this. and also with myself. So in a way, I wanted to reference to these three generations of artists that kind of had these parallel interests um, with this album, no? And so this entity was in a way the fusion of us three, because the data that had been used, especially what it the data that was used for the training to generate the poems was based on our poems, let's say, not just that of Jorge Eduardo Egilson. So I wanted to create this other entity, and there's like an inner joke with the album, because one of the phrases, one of the um, verses that the AI came out with, it was in Spanish, El tiempo del hombre, or the time of man. So it was basically me and my support of a creative technologist, which she's Holly Grimm. She's of Navajo origin. So it was two women behind the time of man. and and I don't know if I mean, maybe that's not that obvious, but I wanted to share this because that was like an inner joke for me. So there's also a video associated, which you could see a part as well in the video that you just showed, and in which I just record myself as a performance, no, in which I'm burying this album. This is because quipus has been mostly found underground, but also a lot of our history as Peruvians, or what we're taught that we are, references to that past that is buried. And this is also a constant in many artists reference what we call huacos, no, or these ceramics or leftovers from previous cultures. So um, so I excavate this hole, and I bury this album again, so to leave this remnant for the future that is completely synthetic. Um, the voice doesn't exist. The support, it's I mean, I chose vinyl because it's easy to reproduce. You don't need a digital system. You can basically construct something really simple that would be able to read the marks on or the tracks on the vinyl, no. But I also was interested in the this sort of mapping in between the reading with the hands when grabbing the quipu, and uh, the nail, how do you call the in English, from the when you read the vinyl record,
Needle?
the needle. Sorry, I'm very tired because of the election, so I haven't slept much either. So the needle, for me, was a type of finger, right? Um, and then what you hear this video is actually the system learning how to speak. And I thought that was really interesting because when you train the system, it learns how to speak in a very different way that, say, humans, no? Because a baby, let's say, says "gugu dada," but this artificial system actually starts with white noise. Starts with white noise that takes shape within the training. And it's interesting because white noise sounds very much like wind. And the place that I did this is it's in the south of Lima, which also it's an area that was in, impacted with what is called the Paracas winds, no? So there's this double reference as well that I mean, maybe I would have to explain it quite much because in a way it's very particular to Peru. So I wanted as well to do this sort of in between, or something that would be very, very local, but at the same time universal. And I think all of my work is it's a bit like this. And in what it has to do with the interfaces, I'm also questioning, you know, this history of technology through the creation of these hybrid interfaces. And I call them hybrid interfaces not just because of the material, but because of the aesthetics that I use and because of the the history that it references, and also because of the way that they are interacted with, no?
Yep.
So you touch them, you pull them. I mean, the way to play them is actually, it's intuitive, but it's based on how you would play. You would touch a textile. What do you do with a textile? You pull it, you rub it, you can maybe crumble it, and it's in that way. I also wanted to question what we usually conceive to be interfaces for playing live
Yeah.
music or sound.
Well, conceptually, I think interfaces is just like a way to connect 2 points, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, as
And
she was calling out the body. Yeah, that was
yeah,
very good. Yes.
and everything that lies like in between. But what I really like about your work is that all that, like, what you're connected with these 2 points is really interesting, and all the the complex layers that you have, like for example, with these textiles, the textiles, but the coding and these sensors also that you use. How do you mix this? Because it can be considered also like these textiles in themselves are already an interface, because they hold this like language. And I mean, textiles in ancient art of the Americas were used to differentiate hierarchies, and they carry already this information, and you use it like in top of like computing a new technology. So how do you mix these two worlds?
I was interested, for example, this is something that I was talking with you before, and you were mentioning the fact that, for example, a piano is a percussive
Yeah.
instrument, and this is true. For example, let's say it's it's been seen before, people doing, let's say, textile pianos, uh, and I think what I'm doing, it's a bit different than that, because even if it's a sonification, the the symbolism goes beyond just the imitation of an instrument that we already know that it's let's say reconstructed in other material. Uh, in the case of these interfaces, as you were saying, textiles, especially related to Andean culture, were a way of embedding memory. No, as you say, like they had all of these symbolic qualities, but it is assumed that there was no writing as we conceive it. Well, narratives were embedded in textiles. You know, hierarchies were embedded in textiles, and there is all of these. Let's say, as I view it, there was a very different branching of technology, which was based from textiles. Uh, and again, I would like to, I'm interested to put this already as a movement, as an art movement that is happening right now and has been happening for a while. But recently, it's not just me, but it's a group of artists that we are working with this from Latin America. I would say particularly from South America, but also from Mexico, which, we have so many common things with Mexico as well in regards to
Yeah,
this
totally.
history, And it's, again, it's not just me, and I would say like one branch is interested in textiles as interfaces, and there's also this interest in the quipus, which are also textile type of textile technologies. So at this point, I would say, especially Igelson and this new work that I'm developing has a lot to do with putting together this movement, and presenting it as such,
Nice.
and actually presenting it as a movement that has originated in Latin America and has influenced artists beyond Latin America, as there are already European artists that reference the quipu in the works.
Yeah, totally. And okay, so I know that Elsa's work also reflects in two different worlds. Elsa, I know that you were born in Cameroon, but you moved to Germany as a child, and then you were raised in Germany, but then you went back to look back for your roots, let's say. So, can you tell us a bit how you, in a bit, this space in between these two different worlds, two different timelines, and how you? I know this is a theme, a central theme in your work. So, how do you reconcile this in your practice?
Sound has been healing for me, definitely, because when I went back to Cameroon, I wanted to capture the sound of everything that I remembered as a child. So I started recording people in the streets, in the cab, because you don't have like bus for public transportation in Cameroon. You have like taxi. So people just cram all in a taxi, and then the driver has to remember everybody's stop and stop there and let the person out. And then you have to be awake also to remember that, I was going here. So if he doesn't remember, you have to say, stop here, I have to get out. So there's this thing that a system that kind of forces me to wake up and be present in a way that I wasn't here in Europe. And to be like listening, to be just captivated by everything. And when the recording helped me reconnect to that part of myself that I felt like I needed again in my life. I felt like I was disconnected from it, being here in Europe. So the recording was a hope for me to kind of like keep it. And then I transformed these recordings into songs as a way to just like create a world, a melodic world that resembles my soul. And that's why I also love Paola's work. I was just looking also at the video in the live stream without the sound, just to know each other's work, because I don't know your work, and it's very beautiful. I love the threading, and it reminds me a lot of Cameroon, right? Because we also have a really a strong culture in like where things are not said with the mouth or with the voice, but they are said differently. And that's how you pass also the culture to the younger. That's why I also find that language can be very limiting. Me, myself, I speak 7 languages, which is quite a lot, but I still feel like there's a lot that I cannot express, but that I feel, even though I have those different languages and cultures to nourish my voice with. So there's a lot that voice can just not transport, like at least not language, not voice, but language itself has just this limitation. And then, so for me, like something like thread needle or weaving, or for African people also when they were like enslaved and ported to other countries, like they will put stories or seeds in the hair, right? In hair braidings for the people who were going away. I think that type of like carrying memory or carrying history is very dear to my heart. And after dealing so much with sound, I start also recognizing the messages in the non-sound, right? I think that when you delve into sound, you start also understanding like sound, we give it so much importance because of the message that it carries most of the time. But something that you also learn to know as an immigrant is that some things may say something else in a different language, right? Growing up in Germany, there's this culture that I needed to be integrated in. But I realized after being in Cameroon that I needed to be integrated in myself, so that it doesn't even, like, that was more important than being integrated in the culture, because that has the effect that it alienates you from where you are from. And that's ultimately, that's not what you want to have. You're going to have like a split consciousness happening. So for me, creating that unity I did it through art. I do it still. It's a process. It's not like finished. I do it through sound, and I do it through silence. Luckily now, I think there was a process to getting into sound, to getting into listening, and that led ultimately to the feeling of it all, and not contributing to sound, because as a musician you also feel always like you have something to say and to add. It's also nice for me to kind of step back and just be feeling the things instead of the action and the doer.
Yeah. I read that you were your main instruments were the voice and the guitar before you went to Cameroon, and then you began using digital electronic tools and field recordings, and also I saw or I read that you call your performance techniques as live podcast. So
Yeah.
what can you tell us about it?
Well, because I love the format of a podcast, I really do. I'm a lover of radio. I always been weird that way. Like people come to me and be like, "You listen to radio?" I think, yeah, I love listening to just people's stories through without having to look at them. And I think that it's like tickle my fantasy so much more than seeing the faces of the people. And so I love that idea of having people just to listen. And I think that being a performance artist or musician, I just gotten away from the giving somebody's feeling or emotion that I constructed and made perfect for them to swallow, but just going into the more exchange where I get to invite people to listen and with an open heart, right? Because that's where magic happens, basically. And that, like, live podcasts was a way of kind of doing that. It's like a radio session, but it's more like an invitation to listen. And sometimes you can listen me playing music, but also you can listen to me reading poetry or even a book from a different author. Or you can listen to interviews that I did um, that are very interesting. So yeah, so that's why live podcasts. It's less of a concert. It's not so much a concert. So it just invites you into an atmosphere.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to me because your music, I found your music very narrative in a way. Like it spoke to me about, I know, places, and even the words that I didn't understand in German, like I couldn't imagine what they say. And finally, Sarmen, I also have a question for you, and then we can open the questions in the chat. So if you have a question for the panel, you can post it in the YouTube chat. So I was wondering about the extended vocal techniques. Because I also use extended techniques in my own practice, and I read how's her name? Pamela Sid say that extended techniques, it was not a good way to define these techniques, because like for some people it's just techniques and not extended, but because they go beyond what is normative, we think about them as extended. So and it seems to me that you I don't know this what's the name of these techniques you learn, Roy Hart tradition. I don't know much. I looked for information about it, but I didn't understand so much about it. But I know that you go outside what is considered traditional singing. So what can you tell us about these techniques? Or how do you understand these limits in your practice?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, or I don't know if I completely agree with Pamela, but what I understand and I agree is that the terminology, the concept of extended techniques was created by Occident, of course. And we have, I mean, we go to communities, just simply, well, here in Mexico, or the in Inuits in Alaska, or you go to small communities, what we call traditional communities, and they just sing. They don't say, okay, I'm singing bel canto, and I think it was, I mean, it was called like this because it was against the traditional bel canto. It was because of that it came. And I come from we don't say, and I don't say it is a technique, we say it's a tradition, the Roy Hart tradition, and it just started, it started with a man called Alfred Wolfson, a German man who was also very, he was studying a lot of singing, but also psychology. And he woke up one day in the middle of many corpses, and he got a trauma, an oral trauma, and he had oral hallucinations after the First World War. And the way he healed, to make this the short story, he started to produce and reproduce the sounds that were in his own head. And he decided, he said, okay, if the human can produce these extreme sounds in extreme situations, I think humans can produce these extreme sounds in daily time situations, in normal situations. And then, I mean, he started teaching and sharing all these linked with Jungian psychology and psychotherapy. And one of his students was an actor, a South African actor called Roy Hart. When Wolfson died, I mean, the Alfred Wolfson Institute was created, but it was much more focused on therapy, in psychotherapy and healing, to say something. And when Alfred Wolfson died, Roy Hart started more to put these approaches, I call them different approaches to voice, to work with actors, dancers, voila, many kind of people. And they created the Roy Hart Center, which actually still exists in the south of France, in a small village called Maléga. Voila. So what I think, we don't say it's a technique, because in fact, Roy Hart never said a technique. He was working through dreams, through psychology, with the body, to produce sounds and to use all these different sounds in different artistic manifestations. And I think that the limits are not, well, mainly are not in the body. But for me, the technique is the art of the way to know how your body functions. And I feel that the body adjusts to produce sounds as not to hurt you. And sometimes, I mean, I'm very interested in pedagogy. For example, this is another part of my work. And when I see a body hurting itself in a vocal emission, or when I see, and I see with my ears, for example, a body that cannot utter certain sounds, sometimes I would say, I bet maybe 85% of the time, someone cannot produce that sound, not because physically cannot produce it, because it doesn't have the technique. It's because something in their mind, there are some restrictions, because we are educated in a very constricted world and society, and some sounds like pleasure sounds, fear sounds, happy sounds are not allowed. So it's, here I can feel that for me, the more than to use extended techniques, I would say to allow the human being to explore any kind of sound that comes out his or her body, and to use these sounds for artistic creations. And for me, the technique would be without hurting yourself. But it's also dangerous, because you are not hurting if you hurt your body, but you realize that with your voice, you can hurt your feelings. You start to understand and to discover through voice. For me, voice opens different doors not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally. And these extended things for me would be like, okay, to work with your voice in any kind of way is a way to save us from being only one thing, to allow ourselves to be many things. For that reason, I also think that voice comes in multiples. It's not only one voice. We all have many different voices, many different personalities, and we can be the shadow or the light or whatever we decide. It's a big, enormous palette of colors and textures. I don't know if I answered the question, but
yeah, I totally agree. I mean, like, I also wonder, for all you three. I know Paola works more with heritage in her practice than identity, but I know for you, Sarmen, the voice has this relation to identity. I mean, also in the West, there's a long history of thinking about the voice as a mediated, like, door to the soul, or the interiority of a person, or of the person that is speaking. Would you agree that working with vocal techniques with voice itself can be a way of in your performances playing with these expectations of personality, or how do you see this in your practice?
Yeah, I mean, for me, voice is the quickest way or the key to show your personality. You cannot lie. Your voice doesn't lie, and your voice also thinks. What I mean is not, it doesn't think through language, but it thinks through vibration. And I think you cannot lie. You can lie, but the other will know that you are lying because of the tone of your voice. And this is, it is also a way, when I say you have different personalities, and it's very simple. Just simply phonetically, when you speak in English, you have one voice, like a tone of voice, because it like adjusts in one part of your body. Pero si yo hablo en español, it's different. Mais si je parle en français, c'est différent. It's different, you know. So and so languages, going to places, listening, and not only listening to other voices and to your own voice, but listening the landscape, listening the world, also, and to be quiet. I think it's a training and a way to discover the hidden part of your inner being that brings your voice to life.
Yeah, totally. I also wonder, like, for you, Paola, you have also a lot of artworks that revolve around voices, and also for you, Elsa, I know that you just said that you speak 7 languages, and you have a lot of spoken word in your sounds. So I don't know which one of you wants to answer first. I think but how do you see this in your practice?
You mean the use of many languages in the sounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been blessed enough to know African languages, because I found that they are structured very differently. They are very, in French you say onomatopoeia, meanings onomatopoeia are like words that sounds like noise that you make. And that's how African languages are basically. Like zong will be the road, and I think that it sounds like a car passing the road, like zong, right? Something like that. That's an example. And I think it made me also more aware of the noises that certain things have, and maybe why certain words carry the words that they do. German is also a very particular language in terms of words, right? The way that one word will be like 2 or 3 words put together, for example, you know, Fischbruch, Schiffbruch, for example, Schiffbruch, which is when a ship does an accident in the sea, and it's two different words packed together, meaning bateau, ship, um, and bruch, broken, right? And it's put together and makes one word. I found that very fascinating, and I think it's very childlike. For me, it was very easy to learn German because of that. Because I see also images, like when with sound, for me it's color, it's images, and I think that helped me a lot in terms of languages. Why I can still speak Spanish even though school is finished for years ago, years and years, and I find it very fascinating, like the way that languages carry a culture, and that certain people, if they don't have certain words in their culture, they might not have the feeling that goes with those words. I think that is very also, it shows how the mind and our environment works together.
Nice. There are no questions in the chat, but Mariana Carvalho said voices come in multiples. And Pedro Oliveira says, yes, we are not Western. It's probably the weirdest realization for South Americans going abroad to the West. So, do you want to add something, Paola? We are coming now to an end of this talk.
Well, maybe extending or referring to the question that you made related to voice and how it relates to my own artistic practice. I think I'm interested as well in the voice, but originating from the lack of it, of not having a voice. I think even if this can be mapped to the silencing of one dominant culture towards another, and usually I think that's the way that I present it. I think it's very connected to my own personal experience when growing up. When feeling that I was growing up, even if I was growing up in Lima, that was my own country, and I think that's something that you can maybe relate to. The environment, this sort of say of forced westernization, let's say, this way that you were supposed to be in urban areas, and what was asked from you when you didn't fit in this mold that they had made for you, then it was better to just keep quiet. So I think that even that the origin is very related to a personal experience, basically from childhood, and from feeling alienated from the place that I was supposed to fully belong to. So I think now with migration and moving to other countries, I think that builds over this original experience. So it turns to be it turns to be a very complicated experience to share because I think this detached feeling was from before. It's not related to migration in my case. It's previous.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Well, but we come from the same city, and people usually ask me like, how do you feel like being a migrant here? And I couldn't know the difference because I felt like a migrant already, and it was way worse in Lima, because they have these racial divisions and this classism, and like with all the racism that is in Europe, I found it better than back home. So like you already practiced, you have been a migrant all your life, and it makes sense that like it's another layer of experience, but in the same direction when you move to Europe. Well, I think we are on time. I don't know if any of you wants to add something or have a comment. I think that in the comments they say you blew our minds with these ideas about the voice is something that we don't think about very often, and this dialogue opened our perception. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you all of you for participating in this panel, for sharing with us like your artistic practice, and I don't know. I hope you have a really nice evening, and I hope
Morning here.
in morning there. I hope the corruption doesn't win in Mexico or Peru. And
we are in trouble. We are in trouble.
Yeah, and I hope you have a super nice evening, Elsa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ale. Thank you, Paola, and everybody.
Thank you, gracias.
Thank you, gracias.
Thank you, all of you.
Danke.
Danke.
Au revoir.
Danke schön.
Au revoir.